So, I found something pretty interesting on Twitter the other day. It was a post about Rainbow Six Siege, and it was about someone trying to remember a detail about Denari's gadget, the T.R.I.P connectors. And it's kind of like a Mandela effect. According to them, when Denari was first revealed, they explained that the laser doesn't actually damage you, like most would think. Instead, a tiny dart fires from one of the connectors the instant the beam is broken, and it's fired from this strange little piece sticking out. But the strange part, they couldn't find where they originally heard this from. At first, I assumed they were revealing something very believable. It makes perfect sense. But after some research, every official description of Denari has no mention of this dart mechanic. So I figured maybe this mystery would take like 5 minutes to solve. I find the official explanation and prove the tweet is right. But instead, I found something that made the mystery even stranger. Because by the end of this search, I wasn't wondering whether the tweet was true anymore. I was wondering why Ubisoft's own explanation doesn't seem to match the creators of this operator, Denari. So let's start with what Ubisoft actually tells us about Denari. Denari's T.R.I.P connector is a relatively simple gadget. You place 2 or more connectors and they project a laser beam between them. An attacker crosses the beam, they're damaged, slowed down, and you get an audio cue. And that's how the official operator guide describes it. Almost every official explanation I could find describes the laser itself as the thing causing the damage. Simple, straightforward. But this is not quite the end of the story. The Twitter post wasn't presenting the dart explanation as fact. It was someone actually trying to remember where they heard it from. They even admitted they couldn't find the source anymore, or anywhere. And that's what caught my attention, because that's a very specific thing to misremember. It's not, I think the gadget worked differently, but I remember a reveal explaining that the laser only triggers the dart trap, and that the connectors actually fire a tiny dart. That's oddly detailed. Detailed enough that I couldn't just ignore it. And then I found even more in the comments of this Twitter post. One reply simply said, "Ask this person," which is a developer for Ubisoft. He made Denari. And surprisingly, that developer actually responded. He explained that another developer finalized that part of the gadget after he had handed it off. But then he said something completely changed everything. He wrote, "I'm pretty sure that is indeed how it works," which is a dart firing. And then he added, "You might have heard that from any of us." So now, this isn't just a random rumor floating around the internet. One of the developers of Denari who worked on him remembers the dart explanation too, about how his gadget works. So now we're left with 2 explanations. Either the dart mechanism really is intended to be how the gadget works, and Ubisoft simply chose not to include that in any details of the documentation for him. Or the gadget changed late during development, and pieces of the earlier explanation survived. But there's also another possibility. Maybe the dart was never meant to be gameplay information at all. Maybe it was simply an internal lore explanation for how the gadget causes damage. The laser detects movement, the connector fires, and it would happen so fast you don't notice it either way. Gameplay would be exactly the same with either explanation. But then there's the Gadget's design. Take a close look at the T.R.I.P connector. There's a small articulated arm protruding from one side. Now, that doesn't prove anything. It could exist for aesthetic reasons, maybe. But if someone told you that's where the dart shoots out from, you wouldn't really question it, would you? Probably not, because it looks believable. It looks like a barrel or some kind of, dart shooter. Which may be the reason the dart explanation stuck with people. So, in conclusion, did Denari's trap actually fire a dart? Well, gameplay-wise, seemingly no, with the official Ubisoft documentation. And crossing the laser damages you exactly regardless of which reason. But as for the lore, every official source I could find says the laser causes the damage, yet one of Denari's own developers remembers the dart explanation as being correct. And these two things don't agree with each other. But honestly, I think that's more interesting than the dart itself. It shows how game development isn't always as clear as it looks. Sometimes the official documentation, developer recollections or documents, and community memories, they all tell different versions of a story. So now I'll leave this mystery to you. Do you remember hearing about the dart during Denari's reveal? Maybe someone has an old live stream or interview or presentation that did not appear on my web search. Because if that original explanation is still out there somewhere, I'd love to finally find it. It could prove some more validity to the dart theory. But if not, maybe we've witnessed one of Rainbow Six Siege's strangest cases of lost developer lore for Denari.